Hey, this is Bryson. Thanks for tuning to my YouTube channel, Jack of Trades. In this video, I'm going to go over the design of these little motor stands that I have come up with and have been using for a little while now. I started off, with some kind of conceptual ideas and worked my way up to what I think is the final design. One of the features I wanted to do with these, and I'll actually flip the camera around to kind of zoom in on some of the features, is I wanted them to be interlocking so that you could have kind of a row of motors and not have them, or drag them around, or just keep them together. As they sit on the shelf, things tend to kind of move around a little bit, so I wanted them to be interlocking so they kind of stayed together. I wanted to also create the appearance of the motors floating so that you couldn't really see the cradle behind and below the motor. And then what else? I wanted to try to get kind of the brand name of the motor into the base plate or the plinth. And then another thing that I did was I tried to kind of match the font of each manufacturer, kind of the vintage font of each manufacturer, to the best of what I have in my font gallery. And so it took a couple of iterations to get to what we have here. In the original concept, I was playing around with that interlocking feature. I ended up going with a tapered dovetail. So I wanted them to kind of wedge together and almost lock in. But I ran into some problems with that. As you can see, these don't really interlock very well. I mean, if they're just flat on the table, they're good. But if you go to try to move it around, they just kind of fall apart, right? They don't really lock positively together. And then, as you're putting them together, you can kind of fall apart. The other thing that was wrong with the first iteration is that the support column for the motor wasn't very strong. And I'm not doing 100% infill on these prints. So these are kind of flexy and breakable. I mean, it's a motor stand, it's not doing anything, but I want it to be a little more robust than that. So I beefed that up. The other problem I had in the first iteration was that the motors were sitting too close together, where the magnets from the motors would kind of pull them together like that. So I made the bases a little wider to spread out the motors, as you see here, so that we didn't have that interaction between the motors. And then I also improved the interlocking feature as well. And I'll go ahead and flip the camera around to show that, because it came out really well. And so I've got a variety of designs of these guys, where really the only design change is the text on the plinth of the stand. But otherwise, it's they work. You can see here, this thing doesn't even want to it doesn't even want to sit. Like if you wanted to display it, it kind of wants to rotate around depending on the polarity of the magnets adjacent to it. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and flip the camera around and we can look a little bit closer on how the design of these motor stands. Alright, so these orange ones were actually my first test prints. I was just printing the base to try out this interlocking feature. As you can see here, we have a dovetail feature, which interlocks with you have a male-female dovetail feature. And then from the side you can see that dovetail is tapered slightly, and the idea is that it would wedge itself into the adjacent piece and it would be kind of lock itself into place, but it's not really a smooth wedge. And then because of some other issues in the design, these weren't sitting flush, so these would kind of sit proud. And I was also playing around with kind of different engravings into the base of the plinth, if I can get that to focus. There we go. This is Jack of Trades. And as I mentioned earlier, these were just too narrow and too close together, so it causes the motors to kind of interact with each other. And the base wasn't very strong, or the column wasn't very strong, as we can see here. So there's that profile of that column, and it just really is not very durable. So that led to a bunch of design changes, which came to this design. So I'll just kind of demonstrate this interlocking feature. You can kind of see if I wiggle these around, they fall apart pretty easily. If I go to this guy, you can wiggle these around. You could pick this up, and they don't come apart. But you can actually pop them off pretty easily. I probably shouldn't have dumped my motors on the ground. So what I did was I stuck with that tapered dovetail design. Let's first look at that column. The column is significantly beefier. It kind of comes up to the back side of the back support of the motor. So we get a little bit more material there, so it's less prone to breakage. But more importantly, let's look at that interlocking feature. What I did was, it still starts off, you know, as a tapered dovetail in, I guess, that direction, but then I actually chopped it. I chopped the corner down, and I created these little dimples. Actually, I guess it's the inverse of a dimple. It's a bump. There's basically a little bump on each face there, so that when this guy, you kind of have to load one end in first, and then it just kind of snaps in place. And these have actually been worn out a little bit, so they're not as snappy. That one snaps in place. So they snap into place, and then they don't fall apart. Better improvement on that interlocking feature. And then we can kind of see some of the different embossments on these stands. You got Kyosho, Associated, I got the Yokomo one. So, I don't know, it was a fun little project. Now I have all these motor stand designs that I can print out if I need more. But I think at the moment I have like, I don't know, 18 or so, and they work. Now, you know, there's stuff out there. I've seen them on eBay, but they're not cheap. And I figured, why not design something that fits my needs versus buying someone else's design. So, yeah, they work out nice. I've been using them for a couple months now, and I'm happy with it. I can call this project done. The other thing I was doing on these is I was putting these little nubs in here, which lined up with the motor mount screws, so that you can kind of lock in that orientation of the motor. But it's not consistent from motor to motor, so some motors it might line up the label so it faces outwards nicely, and other motors it doesn't line it up. So I think if I continue printing these, I'll eliminate that bump. Alright, and that's all I got. It's a short video. Thanks for tuning in and watching. Have a good one. Take care. Bye. I gotta clean up all my motors.